Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And this is Ask Rob and Rob.
Hello everyone and welcome to Ask Rob and Rob, the show where you give us your wonderful questions and we do our very best to give you a wonderful answer, or at least a useful answer. It's super simple to get on the show. We've done hundreds of these episodes now, and hopefully you do know how to get on the show. But just in case you're new to the podcast or you haven't quite absorbed the information, here's another reminder.
Yep, so easy. Just call 013 808 0035 or you can go to propertyhub.net/ask. Either of those methods will leave you to a voicemail where you can leave us a recording of your burning question, just like Gareth did.
Hi Rob and Rob, it's Gareth here from your neck of the woods, Rob the Wirral. I listen to your podcasts every week at the gym and always find them really informative and inspiring. So thank you very much and keep them coming. My question is, give or take a bit, if we're in year 15 or so of the 18-year property cycle and that a crash in the market according to the cycle of principles is inevitable, then what preparation would you suggest we do now to minimise any potential impact that this may have to buy-to-let and deal sourcing strategy? Thanks very much and look forward to your answer.
Gareth, I want 2 more reps out of you before we answer this.
He's going easy on you as well because you're from such a wonderful part of the world.
Yeah, normally I'd ask for another 10. Go on, Robert. Let's assume Gareth's done the reps and let's give him an answer.
Okay, so I think this is a really interesting question and it's something that I've started thinking about a bit recently, but we haven't actually talked about. So see what you think about this. I think Gareth sounds like he's coming in with a sort of a healthy understanding of the property cycle, but I think it can be used in a less healthy way. And what I mean by that is because we talked about the cycle so much, we get endless questions about where do you think we are in the cycle, what's going to happen next? And those are completely understandable questions to have, but they get you very fixated on what's going to happen over the coming months or maybe the next year or two. Or to put it a better way, they get you very fixated on what might happen over the next year or two. Because the cycle is a useful model, but we've said every time that we talked about this, that the 18-year part is an average. It doesn't always work like that. So it's very easy to spend a lot of time convincing yourself that a crash is just about to happen and therefore not investing. So it's not a model that you can use with complete reliability. To make matters worse, it would be a bit weird if you did have such complete faith in the model that you just ignored what was going on in the world and followed it blindly, which is why people don't do it. And so if we look at everything that's been going on ever since Brexit in 2016, was it? Whenever it was, people have been saying, oh, this mad thing has happened. Does that mean that the cycle is broken? And as a result, the cycle isn't even helpful there because it's still getting people fixated on what might happen to property prices. So this is all a bit of a rant to say that while I think, Gareth, you come in with a very sensible take on this, what could I do to prepare if this is inevitable? A lot of people, I think, have a less healthy take on it and are always obsessing about when that crash may be and therefore end up not investing at all. And not investing at all is, generally speaking, the worst thing you can do. So basically, I think my answer would be maintain the attitude that you've got now, do what you're going to do without worrying about the exact timing too much, but do some basic things to prepare. For example, mortgages and financing is a big one. We know from past experiences that when a crash does happen, it's going to be much harder to get mortgages. So if you're in an expansionary frame of mind, you might want to go and do as much remortgaging as you can while you can. So you've got that cash sitting there ready to deploy. Because the other thing that you mentioned was deal sourcing. Deal sourcing is going to get a lot easier if there is a crash because suddenly everyone's going to be freaking out and wanting to sell. So again, it's about making sure that you're ready for that. Rob, I feel like I'm giving a very kind of upbeat and almost sort of glib answer to this, but I'm doing that because Gareth seems to be approaching this in the spirit of, well, I want to invest, I want to keep on investing, and so how can I play the market while I do that? If he'd come in saying, I'm really scared of a crash, should I be selling now? Then I'd give a very different type of answer. But yeah, what do you think about this?
I think the framing you've given around this is great, Rob. And another way to approach this moving forward is, yes, you can have ideas of what may or may not happen in the market. But if you've got a great deal in front of you, are you not going to do it because the market may crash? If you look at Warren Buffett, yes, I know he's not a property investor, but he's still an investor. And if he sees a good deal, he'll invest. He doesn't try and time the markets. So if you, as a property investor, see a good deal and have an opportunity to get one, which is easier said than done, but if you are in that position, you shouldn't really worry about the markets, especially if you're investing for the long term. If you are a long-term investor, which a lot of people who listen to this podcast are, then the market shouldn't matter too much to you if you have the opportunity to invest in a good deal. Now, if you're an investor who flips, property, for example, so that's buying and selling and trading. If you do that, then yes, you need to be more alert and more sensitive to what is happening in the market. But if you are a long-term investor, you need to keep an eye on it, but it shouldn't dominate your thoughts. Work on getting the best deals you can now, finding areas that present the best value, and continue to invest in those areas. In the last cycle, if you were investing in London, even way up to the peak of the cycle, you were going to be doing very well after a few short years after the crash happening. So yes, property prices crashed in 2008, but then in London, they recovered really quickly. So London was offering value before the crash. Everywhere crashed together, but then London really accelerated rapidly after the crash. Within a few short years, those losses were gone. And actually, a few years later, you were making huge profits. Now, you could say, well, I could have bought when the property went down, and that was the best time to buy a London property. But you don't know when that's going to happen. So buy the fundamentals, buy the value, and buy the best deals. And over the medium to long term, you'll be looked after.
Okay, Gareth, we went on a bit there, so you've had more than enough of a break between sets. Get back to it. And while you do that, we'll hear from Max.
Hi, Rob and Rob. Max here from Milton Keynes. First of all, thanks for the great content. My question today is regarding emergency funds. So my wife and I are in the process of remortgaging to pull some money out of our current home with the hopes to start a buy-to-let portfolio. Part of my plans is to have a 3-month emergency fund to cover all of our bills and expenses. When I'm looking at buy-to-lets, I'm calculating a 10% buffer just to cover kind of voids and maintenance, which I've seen. My question is this still needed if we've got that emergency fund there, or do you think I can increase my cash flow and not include the buffer there? Thanks for your thoughts.
Hi, Max. Thank you for your question, and well done, because not everybody will be doing what you're doing, and they probably should. Having an emergency fund is a really good idea, particularly if you are relying on one source of income. And what I mean by that is if your income only comes from your job, and then that job disappears, then you have no income. If you have a large portfolio of properties and they're all producing income, then maybe your emergency fund doesn't need to be as big because you're de-risked by all those funds coming in. Right, that's an emergency fund. The amount you need, 3 months is fine. Some people like to go to 6 months. It's up to you, whatever makes you feel comfortable. But it's great that you have that in place. And as a basic personal finance rule, I think it's great practice. And if you're listening to this and you haven't done this yet, it's something worth seriously considering. Now, moving on to your buy-to-lets and how much you should put aside for voids and maintenance. It's interesting that you pick 10%, and you do see some of these rules where it's like, oh, put this amount, 10%. For me, it's going to vary for every single person. And it's also going to depend on how big your portfolio is. So I believe that £2,000 to £5,000 is probably enough for most properties. And the reason of the range will depend on the property. So if you have a brand new apartment, then you would be at the lower end of the range. £2,000 will probably be enough. And I'll explain why I picked that number in a minute. If you have an old Victorian terrace, then maybe the £5,000 is probably where you need to be, because you're more likely to have repairs needed and things go wrong just because of the property profile. Now, a mistake some people make is then they do that for every property. And I feel that's not needed, because as I started with, once you have multiple streams of income, your risk diminishes. So if you have a large portfolio and you're getting income from all of them, every month you're making profit. So if you put enough money aside for one property and then you were really unfortunate and 2 went wrong at once, then you've got the income from the other properties, which could probably quickly top up your emergency fund for your buy-to-lets. So you may want to increase that amount slightly if you grow your portfolio out, but not by a lot. So £2,000 to £5,000 is kind of the range I would put aside for any property. And then you may increase it slightly as you build your portfolio out, but not at the same ratios. So at some point you would stop adding to that pot because you would have enough. Now, there are some exceptions and some variables. For example, if you invested in country estates of 20-bedroom mansions, then you might want to put a bit more aside than the range I've given. But the range I've given is for a sensible buy-to-let range of the type of properties most people would invest in.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said, Rob. Having an emergency fund is obviously a good thing. And I think sometimes people do kind of overdo it, which again is coming from a good place because it's being diligent, and it's far better to be that way than the other way. But the kind of rules of thumb that you see are useful up to a point, but in reality, everyone's situation is so different. People's portfolios are so different, and people's personal situations are so different. Like, some people are lucky enough to have family members that they could go to borrow a couple of grand in a pinch if they needed to. And that means that they could then be a bit more aggressive with their own cash if they wanted to, compared to someone who didn't have that option. And there's loads of other factors as well. I don't know, that's less reassuring than, oh, well, you should definitely have this number. But that's the reality of it. And hopefully, Max, that'll set your mind at rest, because if you're even thinking about this, then chances are you're going to be fine. That is us done for Ask Rob and Rob for this week. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back with a property podcast on Thursday. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.